Hello, everyone. This is Katana Abbott, and I want to welcome you to Smart Women Talk. It's where I search the world for smart women and a few good men. And each week we talk about things like money, business, health, inspiration, and the metaphysical. Today, we have a returning guest, and it has been a long time since she's been back. Hi, Denise. We have Denise Appleby, and we're going to be talking about something you may have heard in the news and maybe read in the paper called the Secure Act and the CARE Act. But it's really changed how you take money out of your retirement plan, how you inherit it, that kind of thing. So Denise is going to be sharing with us the Secure Act and how it changed the distribution options for those who inherit retirement accounts, ways to identify who's eligible for the coronavirus related distribution. So you may have heard of that. And then the last thing we'll talk about is strategies to understand the changes that have been made to the required minimum distribution rules for 2020. Required minimum distribution, you may have heard that term before, because that is when the IRS tells you you must start taking money out of your plan. And if you remember, you might remember an age like 70 years old or 70 and a half. So Denise is going to talk to us a little more about this in just a moment. What I want to do, though, is I'd like to invite all of you who listen to the show, whether you're new or you've been around for a long time. I want to invite you to join our free Smart Women community. You can do that by just visiting. I created a really short link, joinsmartwomen.com. When you go there, you'll see our site. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. You can enter, you can read all about it. There's actually e-learning in the tab, which takes you to all these resources I'm going to mention. But you'll receive 100 days of inspirational quotes by women, our monthly theme-based e-zine, which comes at the first Tuesday of the month, and it will show you who our guests are. If you had received it this month, you would know we're talking about how COVID is affecting your retirement plan, and our other guest is Maddie Dykeweld, really, really well-known author and the co-founder of AgeWave with her husband. So we bring you amazing people. You would have been able to read Denise's article that was in the e-zine. And you will also receive access to the Smart Women's Academy. This is a free online school, and we have courses like my private coaching materials are in there now. We also have a course, a 10-day meditation course. We have a new book writing course coming from Lisa Tenner, who was on the show recently. We have a class on how to get out of debt and even bankruptcy. We also have another course on health, and one on how to turn your purpose into passion. So they're just really great classes. They're free, and we're adding new things every single month. So just come to joinsmartwomen.com. So now you may be thinking, oh my gosh, is this show going to be too technical for me? But I promise we're going to keep it really, really simple.
Yeah.
So now I'd like to tell you a little bit about Denise. Denise is the CEO of Appleby Retirement Consulting, a firm that provides IRA tools and resources for financial, tax, and legal professionals. So when I was working in the financial services industry, she was one of the experts that American Express financial advisors or Ameriprise would bring in to train us. So today it's a real treat to have her with us. So she has over 20 years of experience in the retirement planning field, which includes providing training and technical consultation. Denise writes and publishes quick reference guides, booklets, and marketing tools for advisors. She also has co-authored several books. And she is a graduate of the John Marshall Law School, where she obtained her Master of Jurisprudence in employee benefits. and has earned 5 professional designations in the field of retirement account rules and regulations. And let me tell you, these courses and these certifications are tough. So anyway, Denise, welcome so much to Smart Women Talk. I'm thrilled to have you here. It's just exciting to have you come back, because I think it had to be maybe 8 years ago that
Oh,
you were.
wow, way too long.
Well, and a lot of things have changed.
A lot of things have changed. A lot of
Yes.
things have changed. And, I want to say two quick things before I get into my stuff. First, your intro music, it just makes me feel zen. The old introduction thing. So, thank you for that. And I also want to say thank you for doing this. Um, every time a financial advisor contacts me for the first time, it's because a mistake was made with a retirement account and you're trying to fix it. And in most of these cases, it can't be fixed. And, I find that these mistakes are being made because the consumer doesn't have enough information and what to do with their retirement accounts and how to do it. Um, Most people focus on the market. The market's doing great, everybody feels good. The market's not doing great, everyone feels bad. But it's so much more than that when it
Or
comes
they feel rich or poor.
huh?
I said it makes them feel either rich or poor.
Exactly. And there's so much more to focus on when it comes to your retirement accounts, because as you know, Katana, you can make a mistake with a retirement account transaction that is worse than any bear market.
Right.
So
Oh, yeah.
again, thank you for doing what you're doing. And I'm going to be looking at some of your courses. I've started looking already, and I'm in this space and I want to take your courses. So what about the consumer who doesn't have this experience? Even
Mhm.
more important,
Yeah.
right?
Well, you know what, we always love to start out, and I didn't tell you this, but I would love for you to share a little bit about your story. And I noticed you had, have just a slight little accent, and maybe some people are wondering where that is,
Yes,
what that is.
yes.
And, how did you end up doing what you're doing today? Was there something that happened in your life or maybe in your childhood that brought you to this place? Because it seems like there always is some kind of purpose or mission that we're here to fulfill. And I'd like to know, how you ended up doing this kind of work.
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting. My accent is from Jamaica. I was born in Kingston, Jamaica. I moved from Kingston to St. Thomas, Jamaica, and I eventually came here. And when I came here, I was in my 30s. When I heard the phrase IRS, I had no idea what it meant. When I heard the term IRA, I had no idea what it meant. And I got hired by a brokerage firm, and I have a competitive spirit. And I was put in a sort of a bullpen with a team of customer service representatives. And whenever they would get a call, Katana, a financial advisor or a tax advisor would say, "What is the answer to so and so?" And the general response, if it was beyond, did you get my form? Did you process my transaction? The general response was, go talk to your tax advisor. And I feel that was not very empowering for the advisor who's calling you in the first place, wanting to help the consumer. And
Right.
so, guess what I read? I read the tax code.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
I know it sounds boring, but believe it or not, I enjoyed it. So I read IRS publications. I would be on my way to work, on the train, on the bus, reading, so that one morning I didn't have my books because I'd planned to go somewhere that evening. And a stranger said to me, "Hey, lady with the big books, where are the big books today?" So even the passengers noticed it. And, I did that because I wanted to help the people who were calling. I didn't feel it was okay to say, we don't know the answer, go talk to your tax advisor, when we had the tools in front of us. Because all you had to do was make sure that you were educating as opposed to advising, because there's a big difference. And it's okay to educate, which is part of what Smart Woman does, right? You
Mhm.
give the consumer the tools, educational tools, and then they take it to their professional to give them advice.
Yes, yes. Well, that's great. I mean, think about how much you learned because you were commuting on a train.
Yes,
So that was a gift.
that was a gift. That
Yeah,
was a gift. Yeah.
that's wonderful. So, we said we're going to talk about the CARES Act and the SAFE Act and Secure Act. And these are not just words, they are acronyms
They are
and
acronyms,
like RMD, required minimum distribution.
right?
I think it would be good for starting that maybe you could describe what each of these are.
Right. Now you're giving me a test. And by the way, I have a free consumer website, retirementdictionary.com, where if anyone ever wants to know what these definitions are, they can always go to that website. But I'll
Retirement
tell you,
Dictionary.
retirementdictionary.com.
Okay.
I'll tell you a story about the Secure Act, which the intent was to secure employee retirement savings for Americans. It came with a whole lot of positive things. For instance, if you're making a contribution to a traditional IRA, because you as an individual, as long as you're working and you have compensation, you can make a regular contribution to your traditional IRA of up to $6,000. If you're at least age 50, by the end of the year, you can put in an additional $1,000. Now, there are two types of IRAs that you can make your contributions to, a traditional IRA and a Roth IRA. And there's no age limit for Roth IRAs, but there used to be an age limit for traditional IRAs. One of the things that the Secure Act did was to repeal that age limit. So now it doesn't matter how old you are, you can make contributions, regular contributions to your traditional IRAs. That's a good thing, right? Because
Yeah.
you'll find that once upon a time, the idea was when you got to a certain age, in your 60s, in your 70s, you would retire. Nowadays, people are living sprite, healthy, fit in their 90s, and they're still working. I've dealt with a lot of cases where people are in their 90s and they're still working. And so the question becomes, why should we force those individuals to stop funding their retirement nest egg when they're still working?
Yeah.
So the repeal of the age cap for traditional IRA contributions is a good thing. So now anyone can put money in their retirement account. But the Secure Act came with some provisions that many consider to be negative. And one of those is the distribution options that are available to beneficiaries of retirement account. So let me tell you what that means.
Okay.
If you inherit a retirement account, such as an IRA or a 401k, to a limited extent, you continue to reap the same benefits that the owner used to reap, which is allowing the assets to grow on a tax-deferred basis. And if it's a Roth IRA, it's even greater because eventually those earnings become tax-free. So one of the strategies that advisors used to do or implement for beneficiaries was something called a stretch IRA provision. It's not a product, it's a strategy. So if you go to a bank or a brokerage firm and ask for a stretch IRA, you're not going to get it. If you inherit an account though, and you talk to your tax advisor, they might tell you, well, we can allow it so that you can stretch the distribution over a very long period to minimize the tax impact and maximize the tax deferred growth. So that was a big selling point for 401ks, IRAs, 403bs. So if you're a teacher listening right now, this is important to you. If you work for a company that provides a 401k plan, this is important to you. If you funded your own IRA or you have your small business and you funded a SEP IRA or 401k for your business, this is important to you. And it's also important to your beneficiaries because now the landscape has changed. How has that changed?
Mhm.
The options that are available to your beneficiaries now depends on whether or not they inherited the account before 2020. I'll give you an example. If, say, a 40-year-old, and I'm doing ballpark figures here, Katana, if, say, a 40-year-old person inherited $250,000 and decided to take distributions over their life expectancy, assume that it's a Roth, because we want to do a Roth because we're talking about tax-free earnings, then the total distributions over time could be almost $900,000, assuming a reasonable rate of return of 5%, right? $250,000 providing a lifetime income totaling over $800,000. That's under the Pre-Secure Act rules. So now that the rules have changed, the rules say, unless you fall into a very narrowly defined exception, you must take distributions within a 10-year period. Now, assuming the same rate of return, instead of $800,000, you're probably capped at about $400,000, assuming the same 5% rate of return. Now, this is very important to know. Why is that? Because if any one of you out there have met with a financial advisor, tax advisor, or estate planning attorney in 2019 or earlier, they might have implemented such a strategy with instructions, whether to you or your beneficiary or both. And what this means is now you have to go back to your financial advisor and say, I understand that the distribution options for beneficiaries have changed. How does that affect me? And the advisor now has to look at certain factors, the age of the beneficiary, the age of the owner, the age at which the owner died, and whether or not the account was inherited in 2020 or before. Because if it was inherited 2020 or after, then the distribution options have been severely restricted. Now, I talked about the fact that there are some exceptions, and stop me if I'm talking too much. I tend to
No, this is good. It's fine.
Yeah. Now, don't feel that all is lost when it comes to this stretch provision, because when this was just a bill, right, before it was law, the Wall Street Journal, almost every financial newspaper, radio show, everything was talking about the stretch is dead, the stretch is dead. And, you know, I used to say, hang on a second, calm down. It's maybe it's on life support because it's dead only for certain people. So now if you inherit a retirement account in 2020 and after, don't assume that that option is no longer available for you. Talk to your financial advisor and say, I understand that generally the distribution option is the 10-year period. And under the 10-year period, it means from year 1 through 9, you can take distributions or not. But by the end of the 10-year period, you have to empty out that account. Now, if it's a large sum of money, Katana, a lot of people don't want to do that because it's going to put you in a higher tax bracket, right? And then you lose the benefit of tax deferral. So talk to your advisor and find out whether or not you fall under any of the exception that makes you qualified to be an eligible designated beneficiary. If you're an eligible designated beneficiary, then you still have the option to stretch distributions over your life expectancy. And so the question becomes then, who is an eligible designated beneficiary? There are several categories. If you're the surviving spouse of the retirement account owner, you'll find that for almost every area of the tax law, there are exceptions made for spouse beneficiaries, especially when it comes to retirement accounts. And that's because the idea is that if you're married, whatever you're doing in terms of retirement planning is not just for you, it's for your spouse as well. So usually that retirement tax deferral option is passed on to your spouse beneficiary if the spouse wants to elect that option. So if you're a surviving spouse beneficiary, you still have that option. If you're disabled, you still have that option. If you're chronically ill, you still have that option. If the beneficiary is a minor, that option, and when I say that option, I'm talking about the option to stretch distributions over the beneficiary's life expectancy. That is also available to a beneficiary that is a minor. But once the beneficiary reaches the age of majority as defined under state law, then it switches to the 10-year period. Now, here's another caveat that has changed, and another reason for you to go back to your financial advisor and say, we need to revisit that estate planning strategy that was implemented for the retirement account that's mine or that I inherited, because I talked about the 40-year-old beneficiary who, under the old rules, would have been able to take distribution, say, over maybe a 42 or 43-year period. Under the old rules, let's say that beneficiary died 10 years after inheriting the account. Now we're looking at a remaining period of about 30, 33 years. Then the successor beneficiary, which is the beneficiary that inherits the account from the original beneficiary, continues that stretch streak. Under the Secure Act, that has changed.
Oh, really? They
Now,
got that
yeah,
too.
now they get switched to the 10-year period. So you can see how complicated this is. And here's what I come across a lot. I know I talked about my retirement dictionary. And I want to tell you that's not advice. Education is different from advice. Education empowers you. But it doesn't matter how many articles you read on the internet. That doesn't give you the sufficient education you need to make an educated decision when it comes onto your retirement account. Because now you might be thinking, I can take distributions over my life expectancy, not realizing that there might be a period when it switches to the 10-year rule. And what does that mean if you're not aware of when that switch takes effect? It means that you're not going to take the distributions that you're required to by the deadline that applies to those distributions. And when that doesn't happen, now you owe the IRS a 50% penalty on any amount that you are required to take by law, and you didn't. So,
I mean, that's a 50% penalty. Explain that in a dollar amount so it can make sense.
yeah. Right now, I have a case on my desk where someone owes the IRS $150,000 in penalties just because they didn't take distributions that they were required to take, right? So, you just got to be careful. Keep all the notes that you can. Ask the right questions when you talk to your financial advisor. And in my opinion, every question is a right question. There's no such thing as a stupid question, right? Because if you don't know, then you need to get that knowledge. And the only way to get that knowledge is to ask.
So Denise, I have a question then. What if the owner of the IRA owns an IRA that's an annuity and the beneficiary receives it? Do they still have to do the 10-year, or can they annuitize the annuity to pay over their lifetime?
It depends. Excellent question.
I'm trying to come and find an angle here for you.
Right. So a client walks into a financial advisor's office and say, I just inherit this IRA. That's one of the questions that the advisor is going to ask, what type of product it is. And the tax code in many cases overrides a product provision. So now, if the account was inherited before 2020, then the old rules apply and those annuity payments apply. But if it's in 2020 or after, then that annuity product has to be designed so that it doesn't fall outside of the limitations that are set by the tax code.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So thought we could find an angle there. So
yeah, it's great to always look for angles because they're usually exceptions to the provisions, but sometimes there aren't any, unfortunately.
So was there anything that we missed that has not changed, or did we cover that? Was there anything else?
Yeah, we touched on spouse beneficiaries a little bit. I want to
Yeah.
drive that home because if you inherit a retirement account from your deceased spouse, you have two options to choose from. You can keep it in a beneficiary account, or you can move it to your own account. When you move it to your own account, it's like the deceased spouse never owned it. And so now for you, the question becomes, which one should you choose, right?
Mhm.
There are several factors that drives that decision. If you're under age 59 and a half and you move those amounts to your own non-beneficiary account, any distributions that you take before you reach age 59 and a half will be subject to a 10% early distribution penalty unless you qualify for an exception. So if you're under age 59 and a half and you plan to take distributions before you reach age 59 and a half, then it's best to keep those assets in a beneficiary IRA and take distributions from that. Those are going to be exempted from the 10% early distribution penalty.
Mhm.
And once you reach age 59 and a half, then you could switch it over to your own retirement account. So that hasn't changed as far as what the beneficiaries can do, a spouse beneficiary can do.
And again, this is nothing anyone should ever consider doing without the advice of an advisor. But if you are under 59 and a half, and let's say you really need to have income, you were a non-working spouse, for example, and you did roll it over, there are ways you can still create income for yourself and access an IRA before 59 and a half. But you have to do it in a very careful way. And if you do it wrong, again, you're going to be hit with those big taxes and penalties, correct?
Correct.
And I'm talking about substantially equal periodic payments. And I remember those were so difficult to try to manage for people, and you had to carve them out and separate them. And
yeah, and I'm so glad you brought that up. And there are different strategies for doing substantially equal periodic payments. You don't want to put all the money in one account if you only need an amount that could be produced by a lower amount. There are strict rules that apply. You cannot add new assets to that account that you start that 72T program on. And also very important, when you start a 72T program, you're locked into it for 5 years or until you reach age 59 and a half. And so the question becomes, do you really want to be locked into that program if your financial need is short term? Because you're going to be depleting your retirement savings over that long period, right? Imagine a 40-year-old being forced to take distributions for 19 years. And so if it's just a need for this year, then it might make sense to take that distribution, pay the 10% penalty, and move on. Or maybe you qualify for some other exceptions, because there's about, I think, 12, 15 exceptions to the 10% early distribution penalty. So check to see whether or not you qualify for any of those first before you lock yourself into that long-term contract with the IRS.
And the person who can normally answer this would be the CPA or the financial advisor.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Or they can go to like a retirement plan specialist at their work, perhaps, and they can help them with that question.
Exactly.
So the other thing you had mentioned was the CARES Act. And I wanted to talk about that because the CARES Act, exactly like what the CARES stands for. Is it a very caring thing? But talk about
I'm drawing a blank because I've been talking about this all day.
But the required minimum distribution for the CARES Act.
That's one of the provisions under the CARES Act. One of the significant provisions under the CARES Act. Why am I drawing a blank as to what the CARES Act stands for? I just did a class on it on Friday.
Let's see if I have it. It's in your article, I know, on our website. But they're these long, right? These long, that's why they come up with these nice little acronyms for us. So
exactly.
But this was more recent than secure, correct? The CARES Act.
The coronavirus relief something act. It'll come to me before we're done.
Okay,
but the CARES Act is all about coronavirus. So
That's what I
Let's
wanted. Yeah.
give some quick background and why this was necessary, right? Because this was just for 2020, the CARES Act, but it's very important. You may remember that in the first few months of this year, the market pretty much tanked, right? And so a lot of people are looking at their retirement savings account saying, where did my money go? And part of what you alluded to earlier, Katana, was the fact that if you reach age 70 and a half, that has been increased under the Secure Act to age 72, then you have to start taking required minimum distributions from your retirement accounts, except for Roth IRAs. Required minimum distributions do not apply to Roth IRA owners. Beneficiaries too have to take required minimum distributions from retirement accounts that they inherit. And so your RMD generally is more or less a percentage of your retirement savings account. So after the market tanked, then the amount that you were required to take for 2020 was sort of a disproportionate percentage. And as a result, part of the provision of the CARES Act was that except for defined benefit pension plans, you don't have to take a required minimum distribution for 2020. So you could leave that amount so that it bounces back when the market bounces back, as we have seen that it has done. And so whether you're the retirement account owner or the beneficiary, then you don't have to take a required minimum distribution for 2020. But the CARES Act was signed into law on March 27th, right? By that time, many people had already taken their RMDs. Right. And so now they're walking around with these checks saying, what do I do? Can I put it back in my retirement account? Because now I'm finding out that I can't take it. Well, there were some exceptions made. Usually you can put it back within 60 days of receipt, right? But what if the 60-day deadline had passed? There are some exceptions to the 60-day deadline. The IRS issued notice 2020-51, if you want to go and look at that, in which they said, if the 60-day deadline has passed, but you put it in back by August 31st, then you're fine. There was another provision where if you took multiple distributions from your IRA, you could only put back one. They waived that requirement too, as long as it was put back by August 31st, 2020. And now you're probably saying, but August 31st is gone. Why is she still talking about that? Because it's important. Because I've found that many individuals, without even realizing that the IRS was going to create that exception, went ahead and put it back anyway. And they were told by financial institutions that you can't do that. It's not permitted. So now I want to say to you, if you're one of those IRA owners who put those distributions back, you're fine as long as it was done by August 31st, 2020. What if it's past August 31st? What do you do? Well, the only loophole now outside of the 60-day rule and the 1 per year rollover rule is what you refer to as coronavirus related distributions.
Right.
Right. The coronavirus related distribution is also a provision under the CARES Act. And on the coronavirus related distribution, you can withdraw up to $100,000 from your retirement account and you get certain benefits. So if you call your financial institution and you say to them, I took out my RMD, it's past the 60 days, can I put it back? Well, part of what they're going to tell you is to check to see whether or not you qualify for any exceptions. And one of those exceptions is the coronavirus related distribution exception. What does that mean? If you meet certain requirements, you're eligible for a coronavirus related distribution, which is capped at $100,000 for the year. The requirements include you were tested positive for COVID-19, you're married to someone, your spouse was tested positive, or your income from working or your spouse's was affected. And guess what? If any household member was affected, then you qualify for a coronavirus related distribution as well. So this is one of those times, Katana, where if you put up a friend or a stranger, they become a household member. And if they were affected, let's say you put them up because they couldn't find a job because of COVID, then it makes you qualified for
Wow.
coronavirus-related distribution. Now, what is so fantastic about coronavirus-related distribution?
You just have to find someone sick and bring them over.
You laugh, but it's true, right? You know, so
On
usually,
an ad.
usually when you take a distribution from your retirement account, um, you have to include the full amount in income for the year that you take it. Imagine $100,000 being added to your income. That's pretty significant, right? Um, if you're on age 59 and a half, the amount's going to be subject to a 10% early distribution penalty. The income tax and the 10% penalty does not apply if you roll over the amount. Now, usually the rollover has to be completed within 60 days of receipt. Now, the coronavirus-related distribution provides exceptions to all three of those. If you take a coronavirus-related distribution, which has to be done between January 1st and December 30th, again, capped at $100,000, then you have 3 years to roll it over. So now it's not 60 days anymore, it's 3 years. And it does not have to be rolled over in a lump sum. So let's say you lost your job or your hours got cut back because of COVID-19, but you get rehired and you find yourself with a little extra money, then you can put back a little and put back a little until you reach the amount that you want to put back. But for any amount that you decide not to roll over, instead of including the entire amount on your 2020 tax return, that amount can be spread equally over 2020, 2021, and 2022. So now you have 3 years to spread the income. So waiver of the 10% penalty, 3 years to spread the income, 3 years to roll over the amount. So you can see the tax benefits of the coronavirus-related distribution. Now, I'm not saying that you should take it just because you can. It really has to be because you need it, right? Because we're talking about your retirement nest egg here. And for any amount that you take out, it's depleting your retirement savings.
Well, what's coming to mind is perhaps someone who owns a business and they have, extraordinary expenses that they may need access to that, and they weren't eligible to get the unemployment income, and maybe they didn't get the PPP, and they could possibly get access to some of their retirement and be able to put that.
Excellent point. Because one of the outstanding questions when the CARES Act was signed into law was, well, do I have to show proof that I need that exact amount because of being sick from COVID? And the IRS in notice 2020-50 said no. The financial need does not have to be tied to you being sick from COVID. So as long as you meet any one of the requirements that I talked about earlier, you can withdraw up to $100,000 under the coronavirus-related distribution, and that can be done from your traditional IRA, SEP IRA, simple IRA, Roth IRA, 401k, 403b, governmental 457b plan, pension plan. So doesn't matter what type of retirement account you have, you can take a coronavirus-related distribution. I want to qualify that though. Okay. And I know this is one of the things that you asked me about as we were having the conversation earlier. Sure, you could take it from a 401k plan. What if you go to your employer and you say to your employer, I want to take a coronavirus-related distribution, and they say no? Because I've come across this a lot. You control your IRAs. Anything that ends with IRA, even if it's provided by your employer, such as a SEP IRA or a simple IRA, you control the funds once it's in there. You decide when to take it out. You roll it back. But when it comes to, say, a 401k plan or a 403b plan, your employer and the terms of your employer's plan decide if and when you can take it out. And many of these employers are saying, sure, the tax law says you're eligible for a coronavirus-related distribution, but we simply can't be bothered with the administrative headache and the associated costs. So we're not participating.
Okay.
So what do you do, Katana, if you go to your employer and you really need those funds and your employer says, we're not doing coronavirus related distribution? Then the next question to ask them is, can I take any other type of distribution from the plan? For instance, some plans allow hardship withdrawals. Now, usually if you take a hardship withdrawal, you cannot put it back, right? But the tax code says for a coronavirus related distribution, even if your employer, your 401k plan sponsor, administrator is not treating it as a coronavirus related distribution on their end, you can do that on your tax return and for rollover purposes. So when you come across that roadblock where the plan administrator says we don't participate, find out from them anyway if they offer any other type of distribution that you could take and treat it as a coronavirus related distribution.
So Denise, my question is, so you take, let's say that you take the hardship distribution, you use the funds, and then you're able to put that back. Are you able then to roll it into an IRA, or do you have to give it back to the 401k?
You could roll it into an IRA. Okay. Now, I do get the question where a lot of people are saying, I took my coronavirus related distribution from my 401k. I want to roll it back to my 401k. Do I have to? The answer is no. The rule says you can roll it to any eligible retirement plan. And I want to stick a pin in that because there's something very important I want to mention before I forget. Now, you can put it in an IRA. Your employer could say, we're not taking it back, because that again is another plan provision. Not every 401k plan accepts rollovers. So even if they do permit coronavirus related distributions, they might say, we are not taking back those funds, but that's okay, because you could put it in your traditional IRA. Now, why I say I want to stick a pin in it is because coronavirus related distributions can be taken from Roth accounts as well. So if you take a coronavirus related distribution from a Roth 401k and you're rolling it back, it has to be rolled over to either a Roth 401k, Roth 403b, Roth 457b, or Roth IRA.
People probably don't even know these exist.
And isn't that a shame?
Yeah, and what percentage of organizations even offer anything in the way of Roth for retirement contributions? Because for a lot of people who are low income, you know, it may make much more sense to start funding that Roth at a very young age and be able to build those dollars tax deferred, but then have a big pot of tax-free money later. I mean, you know.
Yeah. You know, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because an increasing number of employers are offering 401k Roth provisions on the 401ks and 403bs. But for some reason, that information is not trickling down to employees. And, you know, I got to admit that I'm sort of, I was guilty at one time. The first job I got in America, when I went to the HR meeting where they talked about 401ks and stuff, it sounded like Greek to me. And so I tuned out, and my coworkers were beside me saying, oh, don't put your money in there. They're going to keep it and not give it back to you, which is not true. Now I know it's not true. So, you know, as Katana, as you're saying, Katana, a Roth is a very good thing. It provides an opportunity for tax-free income during retirement once you meet certain requirements. And the sooner you start, the better. So if you have access to a 401k, 403b, or governmental 457b plan, as soon as we're done here, call your employer and say, does my 401k account or 403b account have a Roth feature? And if yes, what are the options? Now, as an individual, you can make salary deferral contributions to your 401k or 403b plan up to $19,500 plus $6,500 catch-up contributions if you're at least age 50 by the end of the year. You can choose to put that amount in your traditional side of your account or your Roth, or if you're not sure, you could split it down the middle. How do you decide, though? Because that is a financial and tax strategy, right? There's software that a professional can use to look at your financial and tax profile to determine which one is more suitable for you. Because there are factors, you talked about the tax impact, there are factors that must be taken into consideration to determine which is more suitable. Even though I've had consumers say, I don't care, I want to pay all the taxes now because I want to leave a tax-free retirement account for my beneficiaries. So every time they get that check from the retirement account and they say, thank you, grandpa, or thank you, uncle, they say thank you a little stronger because it's all tax-free, as opposed to a traditional, which they would be required to pay income taxes on.
But you know, beyond that, I think that one of the big issues at retirement is you have this huge pot of money and it's all taxable. And let's say you want to purchase a car, and the car, you want to pay cash because you don't want to take a loan. And you go to take out a loan, take out the cash for the car. Let's say it's $35,000.
Mhm.
That's not how much the car will cost you. You have to pull out $35,000 plus the additional taxes
Yeah,
that you're going to have to pay on it. So it may be pushing, you know, close to $50,000 by
yeah,
the time you're done. So, and a lot of the tax planning, the retirement planning that goes on is tax planning on how do we shift our IRA into a Roth IRA after retirement. It's so redundant to me. Why
yeah.
don't we teach these young people that, hey, there is something called a Roth IRA.
Mhm.
And if, you know, you're willing to pay the tax now, and maybe right now your tax bracket isn't that high, they need to look at what their tax bracket is. Just think of this, if they do build up a $500,000 or $1 million starting at a very young age, that is a tax-free pot of money. And if you want to buy a car for $35,000, that's all you have to pull out. That is just so huge.
It's so huge. And you used a key phrase there, tax bracket.
Mhm.
You know, if your tax bracket is low right now, then you want to pay income taxes on those assets now, right?
Mhm.
So put it in a Roth, pay income taxes on it, put it on a Roth where it's going to grow tax deferred and eventually become tax free. Because once you reach age 59 and a half and you've had a Roth for at least 5 years, then everything you take out of the Roth account is tax free. But here's a tip I usually give people, because for people who are not sure whether or not they want to start a Roth account, I'll say start a Roth IRA right now anyway.
Mhm.
Start it with $20, right? If you make too much money where you cannot make a regular contribution to a Roth, then move some from your traditional account. Why am I saying start a Roth with $20? Because your first Roth IRA that you establish starts what is referred to as a 5-year clock. You know, there are two 5-year clocks for a Roth IRA, but I'm talking about the 5-year clock. That's going to make you qualify for tax-free income. Now, here's what I usually see, Katana. People not starting a Roth IRA until they're retired, say 60, right? And they start a Roth IRA by moving money from, say, a Roth 401k to the Roth. And then they start taking distributions. And at that point, we have to say, hang on a second, be careful, because not all of it's tax free. Why? Because you haven't had a Roth IRA for at least 5 years. And because of that, if you touch the earnings, you're going to owe income taxes on those earnings. So everyone should start a Roth IRA now, even with $20. And even if you eventually close that account, you still have started that 5-year clock. So the trick is to start it right now.
Oh, that is just such great news. So I hope everybody listening, especially if you have children and grandchildren and just younger people that you know, employees, you know, let them know this. And I'm just still blown away by this idea of the nice thing about having a 401k or 403b at work is that it's systematic. They're taking it out of your paycheck. So to think that you could have that done with a Roth, because most
Yeah.
people, you think of the Roth as something that they think of once a year at tax time,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's something that they could ask their employer for.
Yeah. You know, what
Or if
I
there's,
did,
yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
when I just started saving, I didn't have a lot of income. And so it looked like saving in a 401k was too expensive for me to do. But here's a trick that works. You talked about one of the courses that you have, which is about budgeting. And that is so important because when you create your budget and you add your retirement savings as a budget item, then it's easier to do, out of sight, out of mind, and you don't have to, like you say, contribute the amount in a lump sum. You put a little bit every month, based on your budget. The budget's going to tell you what you can and can't afford. So you won't put too much where you find it that, oh, I put in too much in my 401k. Now I'm going to have to use my credit card to pay my bills. A budget helps you to avoid that situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's brilliant. So I'm trying to think if there's, let's see. Is there anything else that we need to cover about either the CARES Act or I'm just trying to think, or the Secure Act that we have?
I just put on my glasses and saw, because I'm pretending that I don't need glasses, right? But I do. And I saw that we've been chatting for almost an hour, and there's so much that we could cover.
Right. I just wonder if there's anything like, because this one about the Roth, starting it now today for everyone, I think that was probably one of the biggest gems. And the other thing I think was great is to make sure that you don't do any of this based on, coffee table conversation with friends or something like that, or you heard your grandma talk about, that's what she did with her tax advisor. But to go to an advisor, sit down and have them look at your individual situation.
Yeah. Can I tell you a quick story?
Yes. Yeah. And we have just like, how about like a 1 minute story?
1 minute story. Okay. One of the biggest strategies that's being pushed about the Secure Act is take the money from your traditional account, spread it over 3 years, put it in your Roth. So you get to eat your cake and have it too. And a lot of people are doing that. And you can't, because of that same coffee table conversation that you had. I wrote an article where I talked about the fact that that's not permitted. Yet still, there's another article on Forbes saying that it can be done. And Forbes is very reputable. I'm saying this to say you cannot use articles on the internet as advice.
Okay.
You could use them as a starting point, but make sure you talk to a professional to find out if whatever is written in that article is really accurate and how it's going to affect you.
So what I'd like to do right now is do you have anything that consumers can come to your website to learn from? I think your biggest thing was the retirementdictionary.com.
Retirementdictionary.com. It's free. And what I try to be like you, I take the complex stuff and I simplify it, because I do know that it's hard to understand. And if there's a definition or an article that someone thinks should be on there that would be helpful to them, I take suggestions all the time. And my specialty is taking the tax code and translating it to English so that everyone can understand it.
And to think that you enjoy reading that, because when you said you can go read 2000-15, I went, hell no. I always had a partner who'd be the technical person, who loved that stuff. So it's been so lovely having you here. I want to tell everyone that please come to joinsmartwomen.com and join, and you'll actually be at our website. And we do have the article by Denise on the website for those listening live right now, or relatively in the next month or so, it'll be up near the top. But I also, if there's any other articles you might have for us, you could send to us and we can put them on your Smart Women Facebook, or Smart Women's Empowerment Facebook page. That would be great. Some, like one of these stories that you have. So it's been such a pleasure having you here. What do you have exciting coming up with COVID? Because you used to travel to financial plant, all over the country to work, do seminars and speak. Are you doing more virtually like all of us?
More virtually, yeah, which is good, because I don't really like to fly. So this works for me, doing stuff like this, webinars, seminars, the whole bit. I'm enjoying that part of it.
Well, and it's saving us all a lot of time and energy, that's for sure. So So anyway, thank you again for being here. And you might want to check out the show next week at the end of the month, because we do the shows twice a month live. We've got Maddie Dykewald, as I mentioned earlier, from AgeWave, and we will be talking about a study that they did about COVID and retirement, and how COVID is affecting your retirement. It's a study done in collaboration with Edward Jones Financial, and it's the 4 pillars of retirement is the topic. So this whole month has been about retirement. So
very necessary.
So with that, thank you again, Denise. It's been
Thank you.
fantastic. And everyone out there, thank you for showing up today. Share this information. And if you want to read everything we talked about, again, it's on the smartwomensempowerment.org website, and there's Denise's bio and a link to her site. So with that, go out and live with more purpose, passion, and prosperity.
Thank you.